The USF College of Business hosted its inaugural Breakfast with a CIO event, where top IT executives heard from USF alumnus Robert Carter, the CIO of FedEx. Carter talked with students, faculty, and business leaders about his experiences in the top tech position. The fundraising event for USF's Information Systems Decision Sciences Department also included opportunities for guests to learn about USF's new online program, emphasizing analytics and business intelligence.
It really is a treat to be here at home. I did grow up here. I started my career at GTE, at actually General Telephone Company of Florida, and then GTE Data Services, ultimately what became Verizon here. But this, when you step off the plane in Tampa Bay and you get to breathe that that nice Bay air, it's just it's a real treat for me to be here. So thank you for coming today. I want to tell you a little bit about what I think makes FedEx a unique place to get to do what I do. It's such a treat to be the CIO at FedEx, mainly because of the legacy that I get to carry forward. Our very first CIO was an industry legend, a guy named Jim Barksdale, the guy that took Netscape public. And probably one of the most important things, I have 0 slides today, by the way, so if you're waiting for me to pop up slides, sorry to disappoint. And I hope to get to some questions too. There's some time at the end of this for questions. I think that'll be the best part of the talk, if you can think of some questions you'd like to ask me. But probably the most important thing is the legacy of information technology at our company. We are still a founder-led company. Our chairman, CEO, and founder, Fred Smith, is the guy that started the company. He's the guy that had the FedEx idea, kind of the legendary, paper that he wrote when he was an undergrad at Yale, on how to do this thing that he got a C- on. And yeah, I think that's, and everybody said, but can you imagine, back in the early 70s, he was a 2 tour of duty combat Marine from Vietnam, but he came back and he decided to start this company. And he had to go out and raise almost $75 million on an idea that most people thought was crazy. So to this very day, my boss, I've had the delight of working directly for Fred for the last 12 years, is still just that courageous and sometimes just that crazy. But the legacy of information at the company comes from Fred. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't even come from Jim Barksdale. In 1978, Fred made a statement that's become part of the ethos of our company. He made a statement that said the information about the package is as important as the package itself. That's a quote that's gone down in the annals of FedEx history, and we use it all the time because it's ingrained into the culture of our company. We've always believed that just moving stuff efficiently around the networks that we operate in the transportation world is not enough. And he believed way back then, the interesting thing about 1978 was there was no information about the package. He said that aspirationally, I think is the best way to put it. There wasn't big time tracking systems. There were no networks that allowed us to move this information around. So the journey that we went on is just fascinating, and we call it seeking the edge of technology. Seeking the edge really started in those late 1970s when we began to hire electrical engineers to actually build the first commercial handheld computers. You couldn't go to Symbol Technologies or anyone else at that point in time to get handheld computers, but we believed that we had to collect information all the way out at the edge of the interface where packages were being picked up from customers and delivered to customers. We believed that every time we touched a shipment as it moved through our network, it needed to be scanned and providing a trail of information about those systems. So in 1979, the Cosmos system was born. We began to custom craft these handhelds, and it was a wild time. Probably the most interesting part of that journey, though, was what happened in the early 80s. In the early 80s, the company went out and bought up 800 megahertz spectrum coast to coast in the United States. Long before there were cell phone networks, long before there was any commercial network you could tap into, we put more than 800 radio towers around the country in cities, on top of buildings, all to collect data. These weren't voice systems. They weren't radios that we desired to talk to our couriers with. These were data collection points out there that allowed us to begin to collect more and more information from the edge. So over time, obviously, those networks have been replaced by today's commercially available cell phone and data networks that we all know and enjoy and use in our families, in our lives, and in our work. But the importance of the notion of seeking the edge long before it was commercially available was the courage that it took for Fred and the teams at that point in time to go out and put technology like that way ahead of its time, way ahead of its curve, and to actually believe it was possible. As you move forward through the timeline into about the mid-1980s, we began to turn that information inside out to customers. In 1985, we began to do big deals with America Online, CompuServe, and all of the kind of dial-up capabilities that were out there. We began putting networks, what were considered high-speed networks, in place with our customers to trade data with them so they didn't have to pick up the phone and call 1-800-GO-FedEx to track a package, that they could actually use a piece of PC software or go to America Online and track a package via that. That was a really transformational time for us when those systems that we used originally in order to provide customer service so that you could call us and we could tell you what was going on with a shipment. But also, it's important to recognize that those tracking systems, the main purpose that they had in the early days was actually in-process quality control for us. We realized at scale you couldn't move millions of shipments or even hundreds of thousands of shipments back in those days and do it accurately and continue to constantly improve the process if you didn't have information about how the process had actually worked. Data that you could look at, analytics that you could look at and build into the way you operated the company so that you could see things happening and you could make constant improvements and corrections to the way that those things worked. As the timeline moved along some more, we found ourselves in the early 1990s, and we all kind of know what sort of jumped onto the scene in the early 1990s. I'll never forget, because I had joined the company at this time, Bill Joy came and visited us. I'm sure most of you probably have heard the name Bill Joy. He was one of the founders of Sun. He looks a little bit like Ted Kaczynski if you see him. He's kind of Unabomber-esque, but he's a legitimate genius and someone who we admired. And so I still remember sitting there with Bill in a meeting where my office was, and he said, "Tell me about your website." And this was in 1993. Remember, Netscape went public in 1995. Nobody even really knew about them then. And we were pretty proud of ourselves from a technology standpoint. So we said, "Our website, we don't have one." And he goes, "Well, you need to have a website. I mean, why don't you have a website?" And so, we were whispering amongst each other, and we had a few, innovators that were out there. And so we said, "Well, we better go get a website." So we registered FederalExpress.com and FedEx.com and everything that we could think of out there. But the people that were so much smarter than the management that were in place, the guys in the labs that we gave this to, did something really interesting. It's probably one of our proudest moments as a technology team. We said, "You guys need to go stand up the website." Well, if you think back to 1994, almost every website in the world was essentially brochureware. It was a picture of the headquarters building and, an About Us tab. It wasn't even a tab, really. It was a place you could click and see About Us. Well, our guys decided on their very own, with no management direction, thank God, to do something a little bit different. They put up an HTML page, and it was the simplest page in the world. It had the Federal Express logo at the top of it, and it had it was a small form, and it said, "Enter your tracking number here." It was a blank form, and you could actually enter a tracking number in it. Now, I'll tell you what it did on the background. Speaking of the Z series, it fired off, through those same networks that we had created to use America Online and connect with our customers. It went to an LU0 IMS transaction in the background, got the tracking data, reformatted it on an HTML page, and popped it up for our customers. Well, we ended up winning a Smithsonian Award for that particular effort because, as far as anyone can tell, it was the first business transactional website. It was the first time somebody had taken a web page and actually done something other than just kind of portray information out there. So for us, it was a critical juncture in our history where we said, this really is going to change everything. So we've spent a lot of time since then investing in our e-commerce and the ability that we have to connect with our customers to allow them to use our information services. Tech Data is a great example of a company that just cranks through our services at a very aggressive pace. We love customers like them that are fully automated with us and integrated with our services and servers. But it all started with a notion saying, this can be something that, that we can connect and integrate with our customers to do. The edge of computing today, we continue to try and seek that edge. It's really important for us to say, well, obviously this isn't over yet. The revolution of connecting with customers and enabling customers to do unique things with the technologies and enabling the business to get better and better with these quality control systems and visibility and analytics that run out there is really just getting started. I'm convinced of that. As we sit here today in 2012, and I think back to the very earliest parts of my career when I graduated in 1981 from Florida, it was the very beginning of kind of the enterprise computing era. If you go back just a few years before that into the mid-70s, the only enterprise applications out there were payroll and accounting and a few scientific things and maybe some, a little bit of ledger work that was going on out there. Companies didn't run end to end on the basis of technology. That's a modern era phenomenon. And one of the things that we all have to realize as, many of us journeyman practitioners in information technology, some of you, just coming out and getting started in information technology, is this is the beginning of that technological boom. It's not the end of it. Almost every technology in history, went through a maturation process where you'd have all kinds of vying and competitive technologies that would look for a dominant design, would look for a big breakthrough that you would get to where it would become mainstream. I'll tell a quick story about the railroads because it's such a good analogy for where we are right now. The railroads in the 1860s in this country, prior to the Transcontinental Railroad being built, there were 8 gauges of the railroad, 8 different gauges of railroad that existed all around this country. The Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern and the Norfolk Southern and the Illinois Central and the Union Pacific all ran on different gauges of railroad. There was no agreement anywhere for this amazing technology. Let me say that again, this amazing technology that was changing the world. There was no common agreement about how it would interface, how it would connect, how it would drive to where we are today. In 1863, President Lincoln, who was actually a railroad lawyer, most people, everybody kind of remembers that Lincoln was a lawyer. Obviously, he was an emancipation president and did some very important things for us, but the platform that Lincoln ran on was building the Transcontinental Railroad, saying that, if we could just connect the East and the West in this country, we would be able to unite the natural resources and the awesome capabilities of the United States. Well, he did that. In 1863, he passed the Pacific Railway Labor Act, the Pacific Railroad Act, that set the common gauge of the railroad in the United States at 4 foot 8.5 inches. So the reason I tell that story is because prior to that time, the rail was not an interconnect that worked, and allowed our country to work like it did for 150 years to have industrial supremacy. That one thing that allowed us to connect the North and the South and the East and the West with this amazing technology, changed the course of our country forever. And had we just sort of left it, had there been no dominant design emerge that would change the way we thought about that technology, we wouldn't have reaped the benefits. So my point in all of that is, and it's a little bit of a difficult point to make, is that we are experiencing the era of the 8 gauges of the railroad in technology today. We have not yet reached the core dominant design capabilities that are going to emerge in the near term, that with the internet, with scale-out x86 technology, with storage like what we've seen today, we're getting ready to enter an era of technology where the gauge of the railroad is coming together at a rapid pace, where you no longer have to worry like I did when I first started about, the 50 different networks that you're trying to interface to. The internet is the lingua franca of networks and computing now, from your back pocket to the servers, in the cloud out there. It's a really important phenomenon. So we really are getting to that point where we're emerging into a dominant design era of technology, and it's going to change the way we think about it. Every major technological revolution went through that same thing. Automobiles, aircraft, typewriters, televisions. I mean, on and on and on. You go through this early period where there's chaos and everybody's sort of vying for their own format, and the reasons that one gauge of the railroad is better than another because it climbs better or it corners better or you can go faster on it, to what ultimately emerges as the dominant design. So from my perspective, the most important thing going on in technology today at the edge is the dominant design of internet computing and what we're affectionately referring to as cloud computing. Massive arrays of servers that we can always tap into, granular service-oriented software that shows up when and where you need it. And those are the things as information practitioners that will define the edge of computing for us for many years to come. The business that we operate is one that, without a doubt, couldn't operate, though, without people. I would never, conclude a talk like this and go to questions without talking about the awesome team members that we have at FedEx. I've got a group of colleagues up here at the front table, the IT teams, the men and women of our company around the world that make it happen, that carry the packages, that interface with customers in the most important time, which is when they pick up a package from you or hand a package from you or answer your question on the phone or build the websites or integrate your technology into it. It is a people business, and everything about information technology ultimately relies on people. And so I'd never want to tell you that the most important thing, isn't finding that, awesome new killer app and technology. The most important thing is having people like those folks that took it upon themselves to fire up the website in a transactional fashion rather than just putting some splash page up there with a picture of an airplane on it. It is really critical that you recognize that, whether there are university students that we're getting an opportunity to bring into the business world, or whether there are tenured ZOS professionals, that are still running some of those IMS footprints out there. That's what makes it tick every day, and they care a lot. And at the end of the day, if they didn't care, we would be out of business. It's just that simple. So again, the most important thing today for me was to engage with you in some Q&A. There's a lot of you here. I hope you'll take the time to ask some questions, because I have more fun answering your questions than I do just kind of pontificating. So please ask me a few questions, and we'll go from here. Yes, sir.
You probably have economists at the company.
I do.
And we've had a presidential election recently. We have gridlock in Congress.
I'll repeat the question for you too, sir.
What is FedEx's view of the next 4 years from the standpoint of the health of the economy, and how that sets up opportunities or not, perhaps, for businesses like FedEx?
So thank you for asking a business question, because that, one of the things that I'm most proud of, and it does relate to the University of South Florida, is that when I went back and got my MBA, I was a pretty hardcore technologist, and to some degree still am. I mean, I love technology, you can probably tell. But the most important thing that happened to me, and I promise I'll answer your question, the most important thing that happened to me was to get a solid business perspective that helped me have a seat at the executive table. So the opportunity that I've had to work for Fred and be part of the executive committee at the company, is in large measure a technological ability that the team and I, work hard to make important to the company. But there's no possibility I would be able to sit there if I didn't have the business acumen that I got from the MBA program at the University of South Florida, and it's a really critical part of of me, I think, being able to do the job that I do today. The question was about the economy, and from a FedEx standpoint, yes, we have a great economist. Our economist Gene Huang is one of the brilliant economic minds. He's one of the blue chip economists in the country. He was Time Magazine's Economist of the Year a couple years ago. And it's very interesting what we get to see as a company from an economic standpoint, because and in no small part due to the data that we have, we can see everything that's moving on the planet almost. Our market share of these commercial and commerce-oriented movements is big enough, and it doesn't shift, so rapidly that we can always tell, what the trends are ex-Asia for electronics by standard industry code. We can tell what the trading patterns in the United States are. We can tell what the European economy is doing based on inbound and outbound and intracontinental movements. And we have terrific dashboards with regard to that. The economies, the direct answer to your question is the economies around the world are pretty stunted right now. Europe's economy is recessionary, without a doubt, from our perspective. The economy in China has slowed dramatically. The economy in Brazil has slowed dramatically. And the economy in the United States has been stuck in a fairly malaise-oriented 2%-ish growth since coming out of the Great Recession. There's nothing particularly robust about that, but there are, green sprouts, that exist out there. One of them, in particular, is e-commerce. E-commerce is growing at generally 6 to 8 times the regular economy out there from the standpoint of GDP. We're seeing e-commerce growth to the tune of 24 to 30% in general. We're having a particularly robust e-commerce season right now. The systems at FedEx moved nearly 17 million shipments on Cyber Monday. I mean, just an extraordinary explosion of traffic from all over the world. Incredible. We're swimming in volume right now, which is a good problem to have. But it's one of the challenges in our business is how do you manage such peaky, notions. If we could get that every day, we'd build our networks to support exactly that. But what we have to do is have networks and systems that flex up. We did 30 million rate requests on Monday, which is, rate requests are fairly complicated because I kind of have to match your account. It's not just a tracking request, it's a fairly complicated transaction in the background. We did 30 million of those courtesy rate requests on Monday over the internet and internet services that run out there. So, all that says that the economy may be coming to life a little bit. This is a pretty good peak season. It's likely to be a pretty good holiday season. But there are systemic problems, we think, in the global economy and global trade and domestic economies around the world that are not likely to go away. Europe's problems are pretty deep. Our debt problems are pretty significant. And China has a new regime coming in that is less friendly to global trade than what the past regimes have been. Other questions? I hope. Yes, sir.
Rob, the evolution of, you just mentioned e-commerce. So there's a big contention between the brick and mortar stores and obviously the big behemoth, for example, Amazon. How is FedEx positioned to continue to support that e-commerce moving forward? There's things that are talking about same-day shipping, for example, from the brick and mortar. So what is the plan for FedEx to support that?
Well, we do believe that there will be an equilibrium that gets reached between brick and mortar and pure e-commerce channels. And blended channels, for example, I'll use my experience at Saks Corporation. The Saks company didn't have an e-commerce business. We still obviously have brick and mortar stores, but what we find in that business is that multi-channel customers are by far our most valuable customers. So customers that are exclusively brick and mortar customers in that business or exclusively at Saks Direct tend to spend about one-sixth what customers that use multi-channels do. And we're seeing that across all different kinds of business sectors. So we believe that ultimately some combination of a brick and mortar presence and retail presence, and even if you're Amazon, they're talking about 90 distribution centers right now. They're not talking about one in Phoenix, Arizona, because there's no way you can scale even the transportation capacity in and out of Phoenix. I mean, they completely use up every amount of lift and truck that they can, out of the Phoenix market right now when they ship 17 million, their number just happens to be about the same as what our total number was on Monday. I think they moved 17 million is what the public number was on Monday. But we do believe that there's a combination of local presence or at least regional presence. Most of these networks now run very efficiently within a 400-mile radius. So you can establish, easily next day capabilities, and in some cases same day capabilities if you like. Some of that may depend on the fate ultimately of the U.S. Postal Service and what the expectations people have about, I'm entitled to a delivery at my door every day. Will parcel lockers and places like FedEx office and the UPS store become a much more common way of picking things up, rather than route-based systems that touch every doorstep right now. And obviously the Postal Service is challenged because much of what subsidizes the United States Postal Service is posted mail, not parcels. And we all know, because we all have tablets, that very little of that, has a long life cycle in the physical world, in the world of analog print. Most of that's going to start showing up to us digitally on our tablets. Forrester recently said that there are today about 70 million tablets in circulation and use in the world, but that by 2015, which is not very far away, there would be 900 million tablets in circulation around the world. That's a massive increase in the way that people will consume information, and it's very unlikely. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I really liked the mail. I looked forward to something showing up, and it was kind of exciting if I got something in the mail. I'm not, and I don't mean this to denigrate the Postal Service. I mean, it's a very venerable institution here, but I don't like the mail anymore. It wears me out. All this stuff shows up and I can't sort through it. I mean, and I get no bills. I mean, the very first thing I do is try and figure out how to eliminate that paper, how to get rid of the bills. And by the way, our business, the FedEx business, almost has nothing to do with documents anymore. That was an early part of the business, but it wasn't even the founding thought that Fred had. Fred Smith always believed that this would be a network of stuff, high-value parts and retail and those kinds of things. The document was actually an afterthought. When the company was founded, it was against the law to send documents on an interstate basis in the United States. The laws had to change in order to allow us to do that. So that wasn't the founding notion of the company. Founding notion of the companies was we'll move stuff. The overnight letter was a very fortuitous thing that happened in the early days to allow hyper growth in the company and propel it to where it became, but that's become a very small percent of the traffic that we move. Of the 17 million that I talked about that we moved on Monday, very little of that was document traffic. Most of that was stuff. I'll go back here first. Yes, ma'am.
Jay, Pete, you had mentioned the ability to scale out for the volume, particularly with this week, and we definitely know that very well being Cyber Monday week. Has FedEx looked at the cloud as a solution for that scalability needs to be able to scale to the peak but still maintain overall IT costs?
So the question is are we looking to the cloud to be able to scale our IT infrastructure to meet this peaky pattern? And it's a great question. Our internal technology footprint today is rapidly becoming almost solely private cloud based. So with rows and rows of scale out x86 technology that's all virtualized, very little of it is captive to a specific application. And so what that allows us to do is, as the workload shifts throughout the day and throughout the cycle that we operate, we can instantiate many new instances and scale up the capabilities we've got inside the company in our private cloud. We're using more and more public cloud instances as well to allow us not necessarily to scale, but to get key capabilities, Salesforce.com, for example, and Force.com, to allow us to tap into other software as a service cloud offerings that are out there. We are very interested and likely to be early participators on an enterprise basis of allowing workload sharing between public and private cloud. I mean, what's commonly referred to as hybrid cloud offerings. So we believe that for some time now we'll have a pretty big footprint, but our footprint will look just like theirs. It'll look like Amazon's, it'll look like Salesforce's, it'll look like Google's, it'll look like Twitter's and Zynga's and anybody, Instagram, anyone else you can think of out there right now. And when I talk about dominant design, that's what I mean. I mean that the era of having all these unique technologies that are unreplicable in shared environments like that is passing. And we'll find ourselves in worlds where the stack that we light up on top of these scale out industry standard servers will easily be apportionable to Amazon Web Services or other key providers of scale out cloud technology. So we don't share that workload yet today between ours. The fact that we're so virtualized in our own footprint allows us to be very flexible about how many processors pick up the workload of the various things that need to be done. But in the future, it'll be like generating electricity. I just don't know exactly why we would continue to have massive footprints of our own when I can plug into the wall. It's becoming, the cloud era is essentially a tap into era. How do I tap into infrastructure? How do I tap into platforms? How do I tap into software services in ways that can enable me to be much more agile, much more cost effective? So the answer to your question is yes, but we're not there yet. If that makes sense. Question?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the people aspect of what you're talking about, the
Sure.
most important part of all of our companies. And it goes back to the story you said about the original website, the transactional website. So if you think about how those people were likely rewarded, so these cool guys and gals that built the website were probably, congratulated or whatever.
Without a doubt.
Guess what? There's probably a couple of ZOS and IMS guys behind the scenes that may not have received as much recognition. And I think something that I know probably many of us struggle with is if you put our people into sometimes three categories, those that can do some research and development, R&D work, those that build out the existing technology stack that you have for scale and other things, and those that run and manage what's already running.
Sure.
How do you motivate and inspire each of them?
So the question is a people question, and it kind of tapped back into the story about FedEx.com first coming online with the tracking and the reward and kind of the glory that those folks had, and compared that to maybe the IMS FastPath folks, that may not have gotten quite as much of a pat on the back at that point in time. And it's a very legitimate question about how you manage across these arrays of technology. I'll start off by saying that one of the important things is to actually have people with different skill sets, not just based on the technology, but on their ability. So we've for many, many years had a group called FedEx Labs, and FedEx Labs, if you know Jeffrey Moore's work, Crossing the Chasm, and you look at that, there are different types of people in this world. There are people that like to spin things up from nothing, that are creative, and a lot of them today make their fame on the West Coast and you hear about, Mark Zuckerberg's and others who become, rock stars of the world, because not necessarily because they're great at running things at scale, but because they came up with really good ideas and could spin something up out of nothing. And you have to recognize that those people are actually quite different from the people that want to run stuff at scale day to day and make it operate, or even the people that take that original idea and harden it and take it, engineer it to the point where it will scale and become production ready. And so you have to, it's even though, the funny thing about the guys in the labs is whenever the regular developers get something from the guys in the labs, they start making jokes about it. It's like the waste management truck backing up, beep, beep, here comes their crap, from the lab. Because it's not ready to scale, it's not ready for production. And so they make fun of those guys. And then the guys from the lab, and it's a weird dynamic that you actually have to just pay attention to and manage through, because guess what? They think they can, but they can't do each other's jobs. And Jeff Moore did a great job in the book kind of describing, how the people in the different quadrants of innovation and production, operations are just different thinkers. They don't look at the world the same way, and they don't particularly communicate well either. So to some degree, you've got to take it for granted that there are going to be issues between groups that spin stuff up out of nothing and are just innovative, and guys like Bill Joy that don't ever comb their hair and stuff, and then people that are wanting to get it done, and both things are really important and both things matter, and there's not a good way to mix those two groups together. You have to some degree keep them separate. But we've made some mistakes. My predecessor, I'm not even gonna, God rest his soul, said something really untoward about the mainframe programmers, and this is a long time ago now, I'm talking 15 years ago, in an email. And it got sent all around the company. And damage control had to be done for years, based on that. It was really a bad mistake, because the men and women that are operate, so let me give you an airplane analogy for us as a company. We're putting brand new 777s, that are just these amazing aircraft that are changing the way we run our fleet. We're the third or fourth largest airline in the world, and we have a lot of pilots out there. But some of our pilots aren't flying 777s. Some of them are still flying, 30-year-old 727s. Now we're working those out of our fleet, but that mission that flies every day from Ocala to Memphis, or Ocala to Indianapolis on a 727 is critical. It has thousands of packages on it. It has a lot of customer expectations wrapped up into it. So I talk to my team, because they can relate to it, kind of an airline analogy. I say, look, just because we're building this new future that we talked about with these cloud capabilities and with next generation technologies, and and we spend a lot of time talking about that, saying this really is our future. I say, look, those of you that are still flying the legacy systems for us around here are absolutely critical to us achieving what we need to achieve for the business. And I'll go to their when they retire one of those systems, I'll go to their party and celebrate with them and thank them, and we'll also spend a lot of time and energy reskilling them, if they want to move on from COBOL, to the next stuff. But, all I can say is that you have to pay attention to it. Your question is great. There's no simple answer to it other than be sensitive, pay attention, and recognize that all of the technology in your arsenal is still providing value. None of it becomes useless to the business, and the people that do it are still very valuable. So you just, recognizing that is probably the only thing I can tell you that's really important. I'm going to check my watch. I think. One more question. Okay, I knew that was going to be the case. Way back there in the back, in the orange sweater.
It'd be interesting to see if you have a thought now, but how have you been able to bridge the gap between what IT can deliver and what the business will be?
So because he was in the back, most of you probably heard the question, but how do you bridge the gap between business expectations and demand, basically, and the supply, the capability that IT has to deliver? So one constant that I'm sure that was true when I arrived as an associate programmer at at GTE to when I ride off into the sunset doing whatever I'm doing, hopefully the job that I'm doing right now, is that there will never have been a day when IT's ability to meet that demand was complete. I mean, we do a lot of things to try and become more agile, to try and have more flexible infrastructure, systems, ways that we operate. But the demand for IT universally outstrips the capability of IT to deliver it from a supply side. Now, I think it matters how you structure your resources. I don't think you can do all of it in-house anymore. I think you have to have, depending on your company and how it works. I mean, we have a fairly large footprint of FedEx badged IT professionals, but we have a continued growth in our outsourcing capabilities that allow us variable capacity above what we can do with our fixed heads. So it's not always popular, but it's the most flexible model to be able to, just hiring people constantly to meet demand is an impossible task. You'll never catch up. You'll never, really be there. So what you have to be able to do is let business cases that the business creates that says, we're willing to spend money on this because it has value to us. Let's spend some of that money, inside the company, but let's have a variable cushion on the outside that allows us to scale up our development resources and our support resources in ways to in an increasing fashion meet the capacity of the business out there. But it's an enormous challenge, and I think it's what makes all of us that are in IT earn our keep. I mean, if nothing else, at the end of the day, it's a resource management job where you have to allocate a scarce resource to virtually infinite demand. And you have to do that in ways that doesn't just leave everybody angry all the time. You have to figure out ways to use governance tools, visibility. It can't be some opaque, mysterious allocation, of why one thing gets done and another thing has to wait in a backlog. It's a hard question, but I'll keep working it.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, so as a small token of appreciation for our former students and great friend of the community, great friend of the university and the college. And thank you all for coming today. We will have more of these wonderful events, so please come and attend. Thank you so much for our sponsors, and you have a great day. Thank you.